Good morning and welcome to the Killik & Co market update. It's a 4-day week here and there's not a huge amount of news happening in the UK, but there has been a fair amount overseas. First of all, we've had the publication of Jamie Dimon's latest letter to shareholders. Jamie Dimon is the chairman and CEO of JP Morgan. He has been since 2004 and he's a long-standing and widely respected leader, and his letters are always worth a look. The latest one is notable for its optimism about the US economy, and here we've got a couple of quotes that sum up his opinions quite well. So first of all, he says, "I have little doubt that with excess savings, new stimulus savings, huge deficit spending, more QE, a new potential infrastructure bill, a successful vaccine and euphoria around the end of the pandemic, the US economy will likely boom, and this boom could easily run into 2023. So this really shows a very optimistic view of the US economy. And often we say that markets are forward-looking, and the fact that the S&P 500 index has recently hit new record highs does suggest that a number of investors are thinking along the same lines as Jamie Dimon. He also has some quite interesting comments on infrastructure in the US. He says, "Virtually everyone agrees that we have done a woefully inadequate job investing in our infrastructure, from highways, ports and water systems to airport modernization and other projects." His views actually are quite in line with what Donald Trump said when he was in office, and also with what Joe Biden is saying at the moment. Joe Biden currently wants to spend $2 trillion modernizing infrastructure across the US, so we'll just have to wait and see whether or not this bill makes it through Congress. Last week we talked about plans to raise corporation tax in the US in order to raise money to pay for Joe Biden's $2 trillion infrastructure package. This week the US has put forward plans for a global minimum rate of corporation tax. At the moment, global companies can move profits around the world, so they end up paying tax in areas that have lower rates of corporation tax. For example, Ireland has a very low rate of corporation tax at just 12.5%. In recent years, corporation taxes have been falling. There are many possible reasons for this, but one factor is certainly that countries feel they need to compete with low-rate countries such as Ireland. Before the days of Donald Trump, the rate of corporation tax in the US was 38%, so with that in mind, it's not surprising that lots of US tech companies also have bases in Ireland. If you have a look at this chart here, you can see how corporation tax rates around the world have been falling over the last 20 years. The yellow line shows OECD countries and the red line shows countries overall, but you can see the general trend is certainly downwards. Raising corporate tax rates could potentially be a drag on growth, but raising more money and allowing more government spending could promote growth overall, so the government will have to make sure that they get the balance right here. And finally this week, European indices have finally made it back to their pre-pandemic levels, as you can see by this chart here, which shows the Stoxx Europe 600, which is one of Europe's key benchmarks. American stock indices made it back to their pre-pandemic levels months ago, the reason being they contain lots of tech companies that have really benefited from lockdown. Europe, on the other hand, has much less in tech and much more in value-orientated sectors such as energy. If you have a look at this chart here, you can see the different weightings of different sectors within the Stoxx Europe 600 index. As you can see, it's heavily weighted towards industrial goods and services, banks, insurance, energy, chemicals, and those are all areas that have struggled to do well during the lockdown. However, over the last couple of months, we've certainly seen a rotation out of tech and into these more value-orientated sectors, and we can see this has really helped European stock indices. Moving on to have a look at next week, we've got a big week for US banks and we're expecting results out from JP Morgan, Goldman Sachs and US Bancorp. That's it from us. Enjoy the weekend and we'll see you next Friday.